right? But if enough people don't pay, then we all know fires can get out of control. It's actually in the interest of the people that are paying to put out the house that is on fire, even though that house isn't subscribed. Because if 10% of the homes end up on fire, if I had 1 out of 10 who haven't paid, if they're all burning, then my house, even though I'm subscribed, right, is going to burn as well, because it's going to overwhelm the fire service. So actually, at the moment a fire breaks out at any house, I want them to put it out, even though that person is freeloading, right? So what does that encourage? It encourages the freeloading. So now nobody's paying for it, but we all have an interest in the fire being put out as soon as possible. What's the right way to do that? Why don't we just make everybody pay a la a tax?
Well, that's not the case, though, because the on-demand service, it wouldn't be, you're not just going to be paying how much you would have paid. You're going to have to pay that fee of an emergency fee, right? You're going to have to, it's not going to be, everybody else is paying for their month or their annual.
What did I just describe?
Jesus, you don't even listen to your own.
Why do I this creates a condition in which you're suggesting instead that what we should do is we should coddle individuals to the point where they won't understand this, because instead we'll just let the state handle it. Let the state handle it, make everybody pay, give them no choice but to pay, put them in jail if they don't pay. People would learn these lessons. Half of Chicago would burn down because of this system. Half of Chicago would burn down. Half of Chicago would burn down because of this system, and people would learn the lesson, and they would move forward. They would move forward. They would learn the lesson. What you're asking for is using force. Okay, never mind. You go ahead.
When you live in a community, there are expectations, and if you do something that's a threat to the community, you get the shit kicked out of you. That's the rules.
So, like, what if I told you my point would be even better if I got to finish?
We're all beyond stupid and pathetic.
Dealing with your waste, that's done by the government. There's private entities that partake in the system along the way, but the government oversees it. Your local government, your municipality, state, hey, fucking EPA,
He was all stupid and pathetic beyond belief.
You want to throw on them. They all have
Dr. Australia wrote in the chat, Monica Pig emoji. Why won't the mods kick me? This room is still being recorded. Movie emojis. 5 times YouTube, IG, and Clown House. Thanks everyone for the content harvesting. You are all beyond stupid and pathetic. Welcome back to more stupid.
You don't actually have to pay for that. No one actually has to pay for that.
So again,
bro, when you make money from projects like that, why would anyone pay for that?
Because
a bridge in Canada,
maintenance.
A bridge in Canada makes us like almost $1 billion a day.
So again, when you look at this, you have it affecting an entire state, because some of these systems affect more than just your local HOA community. They affect the entire populace of the state. Who is going to be the enforcement body and mechanism that says, I'm going to cut off water to these people, or this farmer, I'm going to dam up the river up there?
They dam the shit out of the rivers.
What they would have are water plants where, like, you get the shitty water, or maybe you get, like, low water pressure.
Welcome to Colorado.
If you pay like $1,000 extra, you get, like, water pressure. Maybe it gives you some cleaner, like, shit in your faucet. It's great. Like, we need a water premium plus.
Okay, so there's
you made this point, right? Like, there's already, like, you made a really good point about Chicago. Like, Chicago did this already. What they did was they reduced the taxes in the city that, like, and then that impacted the fire department, meaning the fire response time increased highly. So they had to, like, raise their property taxes to, like, levy that risk of fire and property damage. So, like, we have seen this before, like, where, like, if one were to say, hey, I'm going to taxes to the city, and vote to, like, say, hey, I'm not going to do this, it does impact the bigger community as a whole, and we have examples of data behind that. Wouldn't you agree that's, like, I mean, this is
animal and small animal, that's, like, this, like, important distinction. Like, it's just obvious that, you know, things come in degrees.
Listen, would I like to live in a world where taxes are voluntary? Hell fucking yeah. Unfortunately, I live in a world where people want to live in communities and not
to see this like as a parallel to the racism thing.
You have to solve
the motivation behind the sociological social science use is actually the fact that there is no like a continuum of degrees.
You have to deal with that somehow.
what white people are doing to black people, is just
you're
like
gonna
some
occupy, you're gonna be a part of us.
level of degree removed from what black people do
But like,
to
you
white
just start
people,
a business,
like in some
you have
hateful
the same
situations.
rights.
And
You
you
know what
can
I
be
mean?
like, oh well,
It's just
I
an
want a
education thing. There
fancy
should be
name
universal
and like
education.
an
I'm saying start a
unofficial
business.
kind
You
of
can just
category for
levy
those two.
all your opportunity
the
as
claim
a business, as a nonprofit.
their
Like,
side
you can get
is
things
like
for society.
it's
You just
not
have
a
to
matter
enable
of degree,
yourself
but
in a way that doesn't
there's
make
something
you
actually
Right.
fundamentally different
Bro, you're
happening.
sitting here
So if
telling
you
me
have
you don't have to pay
a
taxes,
black
but
person
everyone
being
has
racial
opportunity
compared
not to pay
to a
taxes.
white
They
person,
just don't have the education to set up their own companies.
that's
You don't need a
more
lawyer.
even the context of like, oh, we should be understanding because of like their, experience and the past, etc. Like they're being like this privilege in society. Ignore that. Like we can just say, okay, this is an example because
A non-profit
when a white
organization
person
is at least
in
doing something, all right? Like, how do you explain?
You can give people
don't
food.
want to pay taxes, period, right? They expect the fire department, they expect police, they expect to be heard in court. They want the mayor to have their interest in line every time they sign and enforce a law, right? But they want to live here without contributing to the community.
If I could give you a scenario that we have in our community where it was years ago.
Where is it?
Communications went out to put some security cameras in our community, and it was going to cost X thousands of dollars, and they promoted it for people to actually participate. And of course, I'm like, it makes sense, go ahead and we gave out a portion of the money, and over years that portion still remained the same, and there were some that were asking questions as to, hey, have we promoted to try to see if there's other people? Everybody's benefiting from this camera system. Security, hey, makes sense. And here we are, I want to say 4 or 5 years into it. It hasn't gone up, hasn't gone down. So, and I'm fine with it because, that 100 and I think 20 something annual isn't a whole lot in my situation.
Doesn't necessarily
Look at this. This fails. Especially, I'll tell you where this fails.
But they were like, maybe we should
Everybody has like
do some terminological kind of.
But this model, like in your opinion, didn't work. But I think in other cases, there is an interesting case to be made. Where when a service gets like really popular, they do control the market and they increase prices and they also like limit the options of content that's available to you. So in some cases it'll work, but generally speaking,
That's what I was going to get to, is that in this case, where the few are benefiting the majority that aren't paying into it, yeah, that's fine. Why? Because probably the few of us who can look at that and say, $10 a month, $12 a month, who cares? But at some point, that could get to a situation where I'm going, wait a minute, $35 a month overall, 10 years, other people are opting out because they know other people have been opting out. I'm going to have to say something. Well, guess what? I cut out. I just stopped.
So, like, the idea that BEMA's original proposition would go, and still, Gar, if you're still here, or like, whatever, it brings me back to the Mexico trifecta, the Wyoming syndicates, the range wars that we had on the frontier, because basically, in essence, those communities were all situated, had a cohesion. And for those of you that don't know, you should look up range and frontier wars at that time. Had nothing to do with the Indians. It was just Americans basically living in their own libertarian society, controlling their own trade, and fighting with other groups, and taking control over massive amounts. And the government was feckless to do absolutely anything. And they oftentimes didn't. They were actually utilized as the enforcement mechanism for all of these utopian wishes. And they kept pushing this through. Like the Wyoming syndicate was freaking horrific. And it's bloody crusade. It determined who could come in there, who could farm, who could be part of that society. And if they deviated, they didn't want to pay the tax. Their water was cut off. Their animals were ran off. They're in the middle of the night, they would have a fire magically start in their crop fields to push them out. And so this violent reaction is what would eventually lead under this, like, quote, idealism. And somehow or another, people think that you can stop that more. We'll just put moral. We'll all be moral. We'll cuddly feel. We'll all be fucking Care Bears. And we'll be able to power it away. And it doesn't work that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, nobody's saying that. That's definitely not what a voluntarist society. That's not the goal of a voluntarist society. That's not what it claims to do at any case. All that it claims to do is that it creates voluntary associations versus forceful associations. So all of the things that we think that we're doing that are good ideas, we would still be doing them. We would just be able to do them at a greater degree because we wouldn't have the force of government intervention regulating us out of our ability to do those things. And I still don't understand.
Have government intervention during the frontier wars. You didn't have it because the government wasn't there. These weren't states. These were territories. They existed. The societies that were built only became states after the government said, hey, maybe we could incorporate them. I need more votes. I want more power. I want more wealth. But these were territories. And the syndicates that ran them were, quote, voluntary because you either had to acquiesce to them or you had to go out and go to another one. You really don't even understand your own argument.
Hey, bro.
Yeah, I don't think that that's the case. There was no volunteer. What you're talking about, it's just not the case. It's just not in any the history. You're conflating government. You're saying government, and you got caught saying government. That's why you pulled yourself back because you realized that it wasn't. But I digress. No, I'm saying you just said that. I was just listening. I was listening to what you were saying. But hold on. But thank you. So what I want to remind everybody is how firefighting companies even began. You think that our firefighting companies, they started with taxation? What happened in the early, did you know how they did it back in the day? They would slap shit on the little plaques or whatever on their house so you knew what fire department, someone's messaging me, what fire department what private fire companies were for you and came into it would. And also, I was trying to process this, and I was listening to
that would be your libertarian society. That prior
hold
period that sucked would be your libertarian utopian bullshit.
Yeah, the whole thing spun itself.
You need both. You need central and decentral. Like, there's an argument for both.
I actually, when Bean is done, I want to say something to Brett.
Hi, Bean. Come here, Bean. So the situation, someone had given it earlier, and they were speaking. I think it was Dewey. He was speaking, and he said like the 1 out of 10, you have like 1,000 houses, and 1 out of 10 don't pay, and then you have this. And I was responding, and then everyone said, "Oh, you just didn't even listen." I don't understand how what I was responding to showed that I didn't listen. I was explicitly explaining that in those cases, people would have to, it's not that they would just show up and let the houses burn. They would show up and then they would be charged, right? If that fire went over that line, right? And the fire department for the other people, whatever, they would put it out, but then they would be held liable for any type of damages but
you'd have to force that on them. You'd have to force that on them.
What's the penalty for them not?
Yeah, like you put out the fire on my house. I didn't ask you to. You did that